people come to Cressbrook Dale, but how many of them know about the macabre, gruesome history of this part of the Peak District? Beneath my feet may lie the remains of Lingard, of Black Harry. Good morning. Today I'm in the little village of Lytton in the White Peak. It's not very often I come to the White Peak, and it's not very often I come to villages, but there's a special reason for being here today, because today I'm going to be telling you the story, the true story about a murder and a punishment. This story is from just over 200 years ago, in around 1815. The murder itself took place in January 1815. And with the start of the story, there's a family who lived here called the Lingards. It was a large family living in a very small cottage, and they were very poor. There was the mother, the father, and 6 children. But at one time there had been 10 children. 4 of the children had passed away a few years earlier in a smallpox epidemic. One of the children was a boy called Anthony Lingard. Life was very difficult for the Lingards, and for most people living in Lytton at that time. The Lingards lived in a tiny cottage which was overcrowded. They were very poor. They didn't even have money to pay for candles. This is Tansley Dale. It's a very small dale that leads on to the much bigger Cressbrook Dale. At one point, Tansley Dale, and indeed parts of Cressbrook Dale, were quarried. Look at that stunning view. Today, the White Peak is considered very beautiful, very scenic. It's full of tourists. The little villages such as Lytton are full of holiday cottages where people pay a lot of money to stay in a rustic little cottage. But it wasn't that long ago when things were very different here. Those same cottages were overcrowded with large families. There was no heating, there was no electricity, there was no indoor sanitation. At night time, it was dark because people often couldn't afford candles. There was incredible poverty. The beautiful landscape around these villages was not always quite so beautiful. And shortly we will be going to an area, a dale, which was at one time the place of horrific, gruesome sights. So this is a true story, although some of the facts are disputed. Depending on which account you read, the facts are a little bit different. But the essentials are true, and it involves Anthony Lingard, who lived in a small cottage in Lytton just over 200 years ago. Anthony Lingard and his family were very poor. And when he was 23 years old, Anthony found his situation get worse when one of the local girls told him she was pregnant with his child. Now, Anthony knew that he couldn't afford to support a child, to support a family, and he wasn't even sure if the child was his. But his situation, regardless, was a very difficult one. He needed to buy off the girl, and he needed money. The pregnant girl's name was Rebecca Knoll, and she was a housemaid at Cressbrook Hall. She would prove to be a key witness in the story that I'm going to tell you. Anthony Lingard had a plan. Recently he'd started a secret relationship with a widow much older than him, a 46-year-old woman called Hannah Oliver. Now, Hannah Oliver was relatively quite wealthy. Following the death of her husband, she had taken on managing a toll house in a nearby village. The village in question was Wardlow Myers, which is very close to Lytton, just a short walk away. And Anthony Lingard and Hannah were having a secret relationship. She was relatively wealthy for local people because of her job manning the toll house. She could afford luxuries like handmade shoes and a silk scarf. These were her prized possessions. The handmade shoes were red, and they were made locally in Stony Middleton, just a few miles away. And they were made by hand to order. So one dark, freezing cold night in January 1815, Anthony took the track that runs just above Cressbrook Dale, the short distance from Lytton over there to Wardlow Myers over there, for a secret meeting with Hannah. Now, Hannah was probably expecting his visit, but what she wasn't expecting was for him to make demands and ask for money. She grew very angry. And we don't know exactly what happened, but there's a chance she may have attacked Anthony in her anger. But we do know the result. And the result was that Anthony killed Hannah in the toll house. This is a very well known, very popular area in the Peak District. It's famous. People come here for walks. People come here to enjoy the dramatic natural scenery and the beauty of the area. But if you'd been here a couple of 100 years ago, you would have been met with some very different sights. Some sights that would fill you with fear and horror. Sights of dead bodies slowly rotting. I'm at the bottom of Cressbrook Dale now. Right in front of those houses is where the road goes to Lytton, and it's highly likely that on that night in January, that cold night, Anthony would have walked along that lane and then turned right at the end to come here, Wardlow Myers. And somewhere here was the old toll house, which now is completely gone. So this is one contender for where the old toll house used to be. It's certainly a very old building. And that window, I mean, that's not the kind of thing you put in a pigsty, is it? But it's just about perfect for taking money. Or maybe this was it here. There's just lots of old buildings here that could have been the old toll house. The Three Stags Heads is a very old pub. It was around 200 years ago, and probably a lot earlier than that. It's an interesting building, an interesting pub in its own right. Until recently, the Three Stags Heads used to have a mummified cat in the pub. It also inspired a short story by Neil Gaiman. So that dark, cold night in January, Anthony asked Hannah for money. She refused him, and the end result was Anthony ended up murdering Hannah. Anthony robbed her, took some money, and then he spotted Hannah's prized possession, her red shoes, and he thought, these are perfect, these are ideal for a gift to pay off this girl that accused him of fathering her baby. So he stole the shoes as well, and using darkness as a cover, he made his way back to his home in Lytton, taking the shoes and taking the money. The next day, Hannah's body was discovered, strangled with her own silk scarf. The authorities were called in, and the investigation into Hannah's murder began. Anthony, meanwhile, went to visit this girl, Rebecca, and took her the red shoes and basically paid her off, persuaded her to change her story and to accuse someone else of being the father of her unborn child. And at first, she accepted and took the bribe. She took the red shoes. Anthony told Rebecca that he got the shoes off a peddler in exchange for material. And Rebecca was very glad to accept this payoff, and she took the shoes from Anthony. But quite soon she changed her mind, And the exact circumstances do change depending on which account you read. Some accounts say that she just felt something was wrong with the shoes, but more likely she was aware that the authorities were going around local villages asking people whether they knew anything about the murder and whether they'd seen this pair of shoes. Whatever the reason, Rebecca changed her mind about the shoes and she returned them to Anthony. This caused a problem for Anthony because this was evidence that connected him to the murder. Again, accounts are slightly different at this point. Some accounts say that Anthony got rid of the shoes, that he hid them away, but they mysteriously reappeared in his room. Whatever the truth, we know that when the authorities came to search the Lingard residence, they found the red shoes in Anthony's room, and Anthony was arrested and taken to Derby. Anthony was taken to Derby jail, where he was put on trial. Rebecca was one of the witnesses that told the judge that Anthony had given her the red shoes. The shoemaker from Stony Middleton was called as a witness, and he testified that these shoes were indeed the shoes that he made, and not only that, they were the shoes made for a specific customer. And he knew that because he put a little message in every shoe that he made. And each message was unique. In the courtroom, the shoemaker was asked by the judge to take apart the shoe, to find the slip of paper, and to read out the message. And the message on the piece of paper was "Commit no crime." And it was this piece of paper that tied the shoes to Hannah. They were unique for Hannah. And it was the evidence that the judge needed to find Anthony Lingard guilty of Hannah's murder. So on the 29th of March, 1815, Anthony Lingard was hanged at Derby jail. And the judge ordered that his body be tarred for preservation and then be brought back to the Peak District, to very close to the murder site and to the village of Lytton where Anthony lived, to right here in Cressbrook Dale, where there was a gibbet field. And the judge ordered that Anthony's body be hung up in chains and publicly gibbeted. Cressbrook Dale was a site for public gibbeting. There have been a number of people gibbeted in this area, not least Black Harry, the infamous highwayman. Now, I've not been able to quite work out where the gibbets were placed. The Peter Stone, of course, is also known as Gibbet Rock, and some people believe that the gibbets were put on top of the Peter Stone itself, although that's not very practical. Other accounts say that it was actually where I am now, the bottom part of Cressbrook Dale. That was the gibbet field. And where I am right now is perfect. It's quite easy to get up here, and there are all these spots where it's relatively flat and you could put up a scaffold and you could publicly gibbet someone, and that body would be seen for quite some distance. Lingard wasn't the only person to be gibbeted in the Peak District, or to be gibbeted at this particular location. A number of different people were, including the infamous highwayman Black Harry. He was gibbeted somewhere here at the bottom of Cressbrook Dale, possibly on the Peter Stone, possibly lower down, possibly where I'm stood right now. And I understand that after the body had been left on the gibbet for a period of time, however long that might be, it was eventually taken down, and it may have been many years later, and both the gibbet, the wooden gibbet, the wooden support for the gibbet, and also the body were buried on the unconsecrated ground where the gibbet had stood. So, who knows, beneath my feet may lie the remains of Lingard, of Black Harry, who knows who else. By all accounts, it was quite a big event in this part of the Peak District when Anthony's body was gibbeted here. Apparently churches were empty of the congregation, and everyone instead came and gathered in Cressbrook Dale. There was a bit of a party atmosphere. There were stalls set up with food and hot drinks. Even a minister stood below the Peter Stone and gave a sermon. Accounts also differ regarding how long Anthony's body was publicly displayed. Some say 1 year, some say 7 years. But for a good amount of time, his body, his tarred body, in chains, in a gibbet, was publicly displayed in Cressbrook Dale, somewhere between where I'm stood and the Peter Stone. Eventually it was taken down. People complained about the noise the bones made when the wind blew down the dale. Apparently, the rattling of the bones could be heard for many miles and brought fear to many people. And some people claim that even to this day, on certain dark, windy nights, the sound of the rattling of bones can still be heard. So today many people come to Cressbrook Dale. They enjoy the views, but how many of them know about the macabre, gruesome history of this part of the Peak District? Just 200 years ago, this dale would have been a very, very different place. Well, that's not quite the end of the story. Apparently, Anthony Lingard's skull is in a museum somewhere. Now, there's a video, a really good video, that I'll put a link to in the description, the video description. Which makes this claim that Anthony Lingard's skull is on display in a museum. I can't remember which museum. So that would be quite an interesting thing if it were, because it would mean that poor old Anthony Lingards' remains have been on public display now for well over 200 years with no end in sight. There are other stories from around the same time in this area, two of which are of particular significance. One was from a very short period after Lingard was gibbeted, where two girls stopped and had a rest somewhere on Cressbrook Dale, very close to where I am, very close to where Anthony Lingard's body was publicly displayed. Now, one of the girls had prepared a cake for the other one, and the other one ate it. Little did she know that it was poisoned. Now, she didn't die immediately. She was able to run to Lytton and to tell people what had happened, and her poisoner was subsequently arrested. But that was all about jealousy. The older girl who had poisoned the younger girl had apparently lost her job at Lytton Hall, and the younger girl had got her job, and that's why she had murdered her, poisoned her. Another story from this part of the Peak District actually involves Anthony Lingard's brother, or one of Anthony Lingard's brothers. Apparently he and a friend murdered someone in Cressbrook Dale. They did it for money. They were caught, and Lingard's brother was spared the fate of Anthony, but instead was sent to Australia. I don't think we'll ever know for sure exactly where these gibbets were erected, whether it was on the top of Peter's Stone itself or Gibbet Rock, or whether it was where I'm stood right now, or on the more gradual slopes on the other side of the dale where these people are coming down now. But certainly somewhere at this lower section of Cressbrook Dale there was a gibbet field, and over the years a number of people were publicly gibbeted here. And the bones and the wooden scaffold of many of those people would still be buried in the ground. So as you can see, I'm right below Peter's Stone right now. This is another contender for the gibbeting site. It's relatively easy to get to. Of course, all of these locations may have been used over the years. We only really know about the last few cases of gibbeting in Cressbrook Dale, the ones in the 18th and early 19th centuries. We don't really know much about what happened prior to that. But yeah, this would have made a good location. Very prominent outcrop, literally just beneath the Peter's Stone itself. So this is the way up to the top of Peter's Stone. You can get up from this side as well. I've never tried that. It's a little bit more narrow, possibly easier, but a bit of a squeeze. I'm not sure if this would have been a good location for the gibbets themselves, because it is a little bit difficult to get up top, and then when you do get up top it's just rock, so there's nothing to it would be really difficult to kind of secure the scaffold. I don't normally walk the White Peak, as most of my regular viewers will know. I'm not really a fan of the White Peak. That said though, there are definitely some great spots in the White Peak. They're just pretty small. Cressbrook Dale is one of my favourite areas in the White Peak. This spot isn't ideal because it's just off the path. Anyone coming along the path will see me, but some nice mossy rocks to sit on and a very pretty view. So I'd like to give a shout out to Is It Haunted, the Is It Haunted channel on YouTube. He kindly gave me the suggestion for the Peter Stone gibbet rock for today's walk, for a Halloween walk, and then that idea kind of clicked with the story of Anthony Lingard, which I could remember from having read about it some time ago, and that's how this walk came together. Is It Haunted also suggested something in relation to Black Harry. Now, Black Harry, as I think I've already mentioned, was a notorious highwayman in this part of the Peak District. And if you go to the Is It Haunted channel, he's done a really good video filmed in Black Harry Lane at night time. It's very spooky. Go give it a watch. Just coming back into Lytton now. It's been quite a short walk. The weather's turned nice, as you can see, but I don't think it will stay like this for long. Thanks again to Is It Haunted for the suggestion. It's been something a little different today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.